To solve this quadratic equation, we're going to use the method of factorization. And the idea is to rewrite this quadratic equation as x plus a times x plus b equals to 0. Now, the reason why we do this is really the logic behind it is the following. If I look at this first parentheses, and I call that capital C, and I look at the second one, and I just call that capital D for a minute. Now imagine that I told you that C times D is equal to 0. Well, one thing we could say for certain is that if that's true, then either C is equal to 0 or D is equal to 0. So using that same logic for the expression up here, that can only mean that x plus a is equal to 0 or x plus b is equal to 0. And that will lead us to two pretty simple equations that we can solve in order to solve the bigger quadratic equation at the top. So let's get started. I'll rewrite the quadratic equation. X squared minus 3x minus 18 equals to 0. The way that we're going to find these two numbers, a and b, is by using the following rule. Their sum, a plus b, has to equal the number which is multiplying the x, which in this case is negative 3. So a plus b has to equal to negative 3. The second rule is that a times b, their product, has to equal to the last number in the equation, the one without an x, which here is negative 18. So let's see, we're looking for two numbers which when we add them together gives us negative 3, and when we multiply them gives us a negative 18. Now it's a good habit to pick up, to just try and think for a second. If we're multiplying them and the result is negative, that can only mean one thing. One of the two numbers has to be negative, a or b. And the second thing, we see that when I add a plus b, the result is negative as well. So that means that the biggest of the two numbers in terms of size must be the negative one. When we can't see the result right away, a really good idea is to look at all the factors of 18. And the factors of 18 are 1, 2, 3, 6, 9, and 18. The reason why we do this is because in most high school courses, there's a 99% chance that the results you're looking for, A and B, are within this list of numbers. The only difference here is that because we're dealing with negatives, remember a plus b was negative 3 and a times b is negative 18, it could be positive or negative, either of those numbers here. So let's see. We know that if we were to multiply 2 and 9, for example, that would definitely give us 18. And for example, we could have negative 2 times 9, that would lead to negative 18, which is great. But on the other hand, if we were to add negative 2 to 9, we would get 7, so that doesn't work. After a couple of minutes, though, we notice that these two numbers seem about right. There's 3 and 6 are 3 digits apart, and 3 times 6 is 18. So it looks as though a combination of those two is definitely going to work. Within a couple of seconds, we quickly come up with this solution. If we consider the numbers negative 6 and 3, then we notice right away that negative 6 plus 3 is equal to negative 3, which is good, and negative 6 times 3 is equal to negative 18, which is the second criteria met. And so we have it. We can now say that A is equal to negative 6 and B is equal to 3. Finally, now that we've done this, we can actually rewrite our quadratic equation, x squared minus 3x minus 18, and write it as x minus 6 times x plus 3. Our quadratic equation is now factorized. So when we solve this, x squared minus 3x minus 18 equals to 0, we're actually solving this. X minus 6 times x plus 3 equals to 0. So, for that to be equal to 0, as we said earlier on, either x minus 6 will be equal to 0, or x plus 3 will be equal to 0. This first equation leads us to the answer x equals to 6, and the second equation leads us to the answer x is equal to negative 3. So our quadratic equation has two solutions, x equals to negative 3, and x is equal to 6. And we're done.